The Vietnam War and modern day are two vastly different times, and I could spend the rest of this video talking about the economic differences, the political differences, or 1,000 other differences. But instead, I feel it right to discuss two particular things: Agent Orange and its modern day equivalent, white phosphorus. Which does beg the question, what is Agent Orange? What is white phosphorus? And how is white phosphorus at all the modern day equivalent of Agent Orange? Let's start with Agent Orange. Agent Orange was an herbicide used in the Vietnam War by the US to deforest the jungles of Vietnam that could have potentially housed the Viet Cong. And the effects were nowhere near temporary. Soil has remained contaminated for decades in places called hotspots. Deforestation was also, unfortunately, not the only result of Agent Orange. In recent years, we've linked it to lymphoma, leukemia, birth defects, and immune system damage. All of these being seen in US veterans, Vietnamese citizens, and even later generations. Yes, these effects have lasted generations. But that's not to say that we haven't tried to reverse these effects or at least make up for them in some way. Ongoing cleanups in Vietnam are still taking place. For example, the Da Nang Air Base. And compensation programs exist for both US veterans and Vietnamese victims. Now, what is white phosphorus? And to that I say, let's start with what it is. It's not something directly tied to Agent Orange, and it's not even too similar to it. It's a controversial, multi-purpose chemical that's used in wars to this day. Most of its uses aren't even that bad on paper. I mean, hey, you can use it as a smokescreen. Sometimes you could just mark your targets with it, for one purpose or another. And then you can use it as an incendiary weapon, which is obviously its most controversial use. And the incendiary part is bad, clearly. But every other part of it is bad as well. White phosphorus can cause deep chemical burns, and it can continue burning inside your tissue. If you inhale it, it can lead to permanent lung damage, irreversible effects. It damages every single part of your body. Liver, kidneys, you name it. The only difference to Agent Orange that white phosphorus has, ignore the slip-up, is that it burns out relatively quickly. And, it doesn't exactly contaminate ecosystems long-term in the same way. It doesn't affect generations to come, to our current knowledge at least. And so what are the similarities? White phosphorus is just a cut-to-the-chase version of Agent Orange. It's a more detrimental short-term, and we know it. And yet it's still being used in wars like the Iraq War of 2004, the Syrian Civil War, 2011, and even as recently as the Gaza conflict. Thinking about Agent Orange, we knew it could deforest the terrain. Maybe in some capacity knew its effects would affect the land for decades. But we had no idea of some of the health side effects until after the damage was done. White phosphorus has been studied enough for us to know the health effects. Detrimental. And so it really is just a more deadly Agent Orange, used in more places and still viable today in the eyes of governments around the world. Oh, and by the way, this is technically a war crime to use white phosphorus as like a weapon. Apparently it's not a war crime to use it as like a smokescreen, but if it's used against civilians, or if it you can't distinguish whether or not it's a civilian or a soldier, yeah, it's just a war crime to use it. So I mean, come on, let's shape up here.